Swift and Tips podcast.
I saw something. If you go back to the Firebase console,
Yep.
I saw something really interesting. Gemini
Mm-hmm.
in Firebase. Could you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit more about what's that?
Yeah. So Gemini in Firebase is essentially the Gemini chatbot in your Firebase console. So you can go in and say, hey, well, I want to learn something. I want to understand how I can do something. And then you can just talk to it. So when I click on try now, it will welcome me into this chat window here. And it says there is a promotional period until the end of September. During that period, access to Gemini and Firebase will be at no cost. And then I can click on get started. And now I can ask me anything about Firebase, it says. So ask me anything about Firebase. Let's have a look. How can I connect a Swift app to a Firebase project? And then hopefully it will tell us what I just showed you. Okay, so it says, well, create a Firebase project, add Firebase to your iOS project. And so it knows that you can use both the Swift Package Manager or CocoaPods. So for CocoaPods, it will even give you the command line you need to use in order to install the pods. Then it walks you through how to register your app in the Firebase console, to download the configuration file, and how to configure your project. So why is it not scrolling here? I don't know.
I assume this is still in beta.
It's still in beta. Oh, expand. That's why. Okay.
There you go.
But maybe.
But not scrolling. Okay.
So good feedback for our designers to make sure that this also works on smaller screens. Okay, but I think what's happening here is that it shows the code that we have to paste. So now I probably have to reload the screen.
Okay.
I can click here to go back. Let's try something else. So for example, how can I
use Firestore, for example?
Yeah, how can I use Firestore?
Yeah. Okay. So this is like an assistant, right? But is there a way to use Gemini, use it as a service for my application through Firebase? Oh.
Yeah, there is. So and here you go. So it now shows us how to connect to Firestore and how to map data and all of that. So and again, sorry for. Let me see. Is this better? No. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll need to talk to the designer. So our call was already useful because now I can channel the feedback.
Yeah. Sure. No problem.
So about talking to Gemini, there are a couple of ways how you can do it. So if you go to ai.google.dev, for example, typing not my strength today. You will see our landing page for the Google AI SDK for Gemini. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the code that we show here, there is a code example for Swift. And let's go here and go into the AI Studio, for example. And then let's see if this is something that's useful. No, let's start a new thing. So create a new prompt. Type something. So let's create a prompt, and let's say you are an expert Swift developer, and answer all my questions about Swift development. And let me hide that part here.
Okay.
And provide codes. Okay, so we can now run this. And then it says, well, okay, so you need to actually ask me something, right? So because that was just like the initial prompt here. So we could provide more questions like,
let's say how to use actors in Swift.
How can I use actors in Swift?
Yeah.
Okay, let's run this. Okay, so now it starts. Well, it has a very lengthy explanation of how to do that. Let's see. Define an actor. Yeah, this looks good. Accessing the actor. Yeah, this looks really good. It uses the bank account example. Okay, cool. So let's say we're happy with our prompt, and then we can go in and say, get me the code, because we're lazy people and we don't want to type. So I can switch this to give me the Swift code for this, and then it says, well, here is the code that you need to put into your app in order to use this. It also says, hey, here is the package that you need to add to your app in order to do this. And so the interesting bit is this one here, where you basically say, instantiate the generative model, specify the name of the model I want to use. In this case, we use Gemini 1.5 Flash. And then we can start a chat, because this was a chat, right? So if we don't want to use a chat, we need to build a different prompt here. But this one here starts a chat. It sends in what the user said. And in this case, because we already have the answer from the model, it also includes the answer in this thing here. So if I went in and deleted that like this, and then got the code, it would just include the user's message here, right? And then here's where you send the chat message, and then you try a way to wait for it, and then you can display it. So this is the most straightforward way to make a call to Gemini. I will say one thing though, and it's already also included in the code snippet here. So in line 15 here, it says, don't check your API key into source control. And now all the alarm bells should be ringing for people, because if you of course, you shouldn't be checking in your API key into your repository, because then other people might, if they clone your repository, they might find it, and then they can use your API key. But even if you just put it into your application, that also means that it's not in your application, and people can download your application and then open your application in a binary editor, in a hex editor, and then find your API key, because they look very identifiable, and then they can use your API key to hammer your billing account, essentially, right? So they can make a lot of calls and cost you a lot of money. So that's not good. And this is why we said, well, instead of, this is obviously very easy to get started, but we recommend using it for prototyping and research only. But if you want to build an application that you actually ship to users, you should use a different approach. And that different approach is, if you go back into your console, there is a thing called the Vertex AI and Firebase SDK. The API literally is the same as what I showed you. So all of the code that you saw is the same code that you'll be using for the Vertex AI and Firebase SDK. The only difference is that you won't be using an API key, because what's happening is your client application will make a call to Firebase and to your Firebase project, and there is a proxy which basically tunnels your request through the Firebase project to Gemini, and we are using server-side credentials to make that connection. Now, you might say, well, Peter, but someone might find out my project ID, and then they can write an application and call the backend of my project and make that call. And I'll say, well, you've paid attention, and that's right. And that is why you need to protect your project using a feature that's called AppCheck. And AppCheck is a Firebase feature or product that enables you to protect the communication between your client app and your Firebase backend project by using an attestation provider. So
Okay.
if you click on getting started, it will, or maybe you should go to the documentation to look at that. So where's the documentation? View the docs. There we go. Okay, so in the documentation, you can see that for iOS, for example, we support device check and app attest as attestation providers to secure the communication between your client app and your backend project. And what's happening is that basically when your application is being signed, we make this connection between your signed application and the backend project. And whenever you send a request to the backend project, it also includes a token, and that token is cryptographically signed. And by looking at that token, we can verify that it actually comes from your genuine application from an untampered device. And if anybody takes your application and recompiles it or modifies it, then you'll not be able to generate a proper token. And we'll be able to say, well, sorry, but this is a hacked application, or somebody's trying to use a curl command to access the backend. And this is why we will reject this call and send you an error message back. And that is how you protect your backend resources.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I didn't know that about this cool feature, but yeah, definitely. Firebase team thought about all those the scenarios. So and yeah, I'm really excited to take a look again to Firebase because well, Gemini and many other features around here. So yeah, you can build really solid and large application depending on your needs. But yeah, it's definitely great to have this kind of secure things in your app.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe to finish up the presentation, I can, or the screen sharing part here, I can show an application that I've been working on that uses AI. So it is a knowledge base application. So let's see if I pray to the demo gods and if this works. So I'll share my screen here. Yeah, we can see it. So it's called Sophia, and if you go in, you'll see it's a typical read it later app.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday I was reading this really cool article by Rudrang, who shows how to connect the Cursor IDE with Xcode.
Mm-hmm.
And as you will notice, this is a simplified formatting. So many websites have very complicated formatting, including stuff that you might not be interested in seeing. But this application removes all of that. But you can also say, well, show me the original, and then it will show you the original formatting, and you'll see that it is very different, right? So let's imagine that I am too lazy to read the entire article, so I can go in and tap on this notes button there, and then I have this magic wand, and I can click on the magic wand, and this will go and make a call to Gemini to summarize the blog post. So I think it looks like a pretty good summary here. It says, this blog post by Rudrang Griyam discusses the benefits of using Cursor, an AI-powered code editor, to streamline the development workflow for indie app developers. And then, yeah, it's a pretty good summary. Okay,
Wow.
so that is one of the features of the application.
Mm-hmm.
And the other feature of the application is I can go in and I can chat with it, right? So, for example, I can say things like, tell me how I can connect the Cursor IDE to Xcode. Let's see if it can answer. Oh, okay. Was not able to. Let's try a different one. So,
okay. But is this about the context of the articles you have, or is about anything?
Yeah, so this is based on the articles that I have in this knowledge base. So
Okay.
let's try a different one. How can I use observable in Swift UI views? Thinking. Okay, and then it comes back with an answer, which is based on an article that I have in my knowledge base. So it says you can use the add observable macro to create classes that can be observed by Swift UI views, and then it explains how to do that. And that is based on this article I have here, which Natalia wrote a couple of days ago. And then, of course, I had to also try to integrate it with Siri. So let's see if this works. Speak to my second brain in Sophia.
Do you want to use Sure. What would you like to know?
How can I use observable in Swift UI views?
It's pretty cool.
The add observable macro in Swift UI allows you to create observable classes for managing your views data, making it easier to update the UI as data changes.
Yeah, so
That's
that worked really nicely, and it even shows the code snippet in the Siri preview, and you'll notice that Siri is still listening to me. So what's the next thing? Okay, bye. Okay, and so this entire thing is built using Swift UI and Firebase. So let me just show you one little thing here. So I have this artifact repository, and so whenever you add a new article into your Firestore database, this piece of code will run, and it will. So an artifact is a URL essentially. So let's take a quick look at how it looks like. So this is a struct. It has a title, an author, and a URL, right? So. And then it will say, give me a reference to this artifacts collection in Firestore, and then add a document and write it into the database. So if we go back into the Firebase console and go to, let me see, is it, I think it's this one.
Let me ask you this. Is this just an application for demo purposes, or this is a real app that you're building for?
That's what everybody asks, and my answer is I would like to publish it on the App Store, but it's complicated because I work on it in company time. So I could publish it on the App Store, but it needed to be published under my name because we can't make it an official Google product because it's not. But once it starts to incur costs, then it becomes interesting, right? So if it because if people start using it and I have lots of data in Firestore, it might start costing money. And all the calls to Gemini, they will eventually cost money. So I might either have to pay for it myself or start asking people to pay money for the app by having a subscription. And now I'm publishing an application to the App Store that I built on company time, and I need to deal with money. So that's complicated.
Okay.
I haven't found a solution for that yet. But yeah, so so this is how the database looks like. So you can see that for this, we have this collection of artifacts, and we have all those documents in here. And you can see that we have excerpts, the full text of the article. We have a simplified version of it. And there is one field. Oh, it's even the article by RootRank that I showed you. And there is one field called embeddings. Let me see if it's somewhere here. See, that is why this one is not embedded. Okay, I'll show you another one. Okay, so this one has embeddings. So if you have done any AI development, you'll have heard the name vector embeddings. And vector embeddings basically are just a large array of floating point numbers. And you can see that we've got how many? 768 floating point numbers in here. And these floating point numbers represent the full text of the article because that's what I told the model to do. So whenever I store something into the database, a process will kick off, and that's a Cloud function, and it will compute the vector embeddings for the full text of the article, store the vector embeddings into this field, and then when I talk to the app or when I chat with the app, it will use retrieval augmented generation to first find the nearest neighbors, and it will find the documents in my database that match my query. And then it will tell the model, okay, you are an expert knowledge worker, answer the user's question based only on the context, and then I will inject this piece of text in there. And then the model will answer just based on this context and in the prompt, and I can show you how it looks like. So if we go into semantic Q&A chat, it says something, send a chat message, and then it will go to a service which will perform the request, and that request will be run on the server. And now I need to show you the backend code as well. So let's go there. And the backend code is written in TypeScript. So we're now looking at VS Code here. And here is my code that performs this this query. So here we have the semantic Q&A prompt, and that loads a prompt file, which has a prompt in it. So it says, your name is Sophia, and you are a knowledge assistant. You were created by Peter Fries, who is a developer advocate on the Firebase team at Google. And then it talks about the purpose. The purpose is to utilize the context and history I provide to answer any questions I have, and more instructions. And then here is the context. So in those curly braces, I inject the context, and that is what I load from the database. And I also provide the history. So when I have a chat conversation, it will take the history from the chat and inject it here. And then finally the user's question, and sends it to the LLM, asks it the question, and then it will send it back to my client application. So this is a full-fledged application that uses Gemini in the backend, has a Cloud function to deal with the processing, and has a front end to call it. And I think this is a really nice demonstration of how to use Firebase technology to do all of that. Have something to store the data, something to process data in the background in Cloud functions, and use an LLM to perform some AI magic in air quotes.
No, that's pretty amazing. So, and by the way, when we talked about, invite you to the podcast and talk more about Firebase, I honestly didn't realize that the Gemini capabilities, now that I saw it, it was like, wow, there was a lot of potential along with the other services that Firebase provides. So yeah, definitely I would like to have later a second round of Firebase, to go deep into.
Yeah, sure. Oh, and one thing, so promise, one final thing, and then I'll stop the presentation here. So in case you don't want to use Gemini, you can specify a different model here. So instead of using Gemini Flash, you could say, well, I want to use an OpenAI model, for example, or I want to use Olama to use an open source model, for example. And then you can just replace it. Everything else will stay the same. You don't have to change your code. And that is a big deal, because you know that all of those models, they have different APIs. You need to call them very differently. And by just being able to swap out the name of the model, you can experiment how another model fares just by replacing that and just running it. So that is, I think, a really cool feature that not enough people know about.